welcome to Dublin 8. I'm going to read three poems, two of my own and one by Piers Hutchinson. So I'm going to begin with a poem from my most recent collection, which came out called The Gravity Wave, and it came out towards the end of last year. And the poem I'm going to read is called Naming the Street. And it's about that experience of kind of walking around the city with my daughter and hearing her say the names of the streets and just kind of realizing that, this place is now kind of belongs to her in a way more than it does to me. Kind of a salutary experience. Anyway, it's called Naming the Street for Freya. You say the name and the buildings sharpen, the late morning light touching the brick, as if belatedly or as if the street moved back a fraction from my sight and said, it's hers now, her step we wait for, her eyes the houses move towards. The place is printed on her glance first. After that, we move for you as, I don't know, a shopkeeper mops his brow and turns to a less favoured customer. What is it? What did you think? The city lay pressed to your face, lifting its veils, opening all its doors and gates. The parks are full. 1,000 autumns cross the bridge. Wherever you think you're walking is farther back, a dim retreat. But look up now and listen to her say our name. And I'm going to read a poem now by Piers Hutchinson. And I could have chosen many poems. It's kind of hard to make a choice. Actually, it's just somebody whose work I admire a lot. And it's also, I kind of associated with the early days of both Gallery Press and my own kind of becoming aware of poetry. I can remember picking up the collection from which this is taken, watching the morning grow in the altar in the Yablana and kind of looking at it. And then my eyes fell on this poem. And I don't know poetry is all about making connections, I think. Making connections between unlike things sometimes, to arrive at some kind of true destination. And this one, I just love the way it joins up a simple act of kneeling to fasten somebody's shoe to the notion of trees coming together, and there's so much in it. And I also love the verb tholes in it. Good dollop of old Anglo-Saxon. Anyway, it's called Like Trees, Like Islands. I kneel to fasten your shoes. I kneel, creaking, clicking. We seem near. Blade, thong, buckle. I know by which notch takes easy entry, how swollen, how tired, how rested. How near we seem, like trees, like islands. Like trees on their neighbouring islands that cannot uproot themselves and walk, no kneeling fingers, on water to meet. But moved by an occasional strong wind, they touch branches, tangle, may even break each other. As long as life, the heart tolls. They know, in a way then, how near their islands are. Swap nests. Trunk tug is too strong for any thong not to give soon. The meeting lasts only a minute, but these minutes recur. And in that minute, the trees congress their different bird song. Squirrels, iguanas, climbing, swarming, crawling life, fruits and flowers, if any. They can even share lightning. I kneel to fasten your shoes. We seem near. And the last poem I'm going to read is the last poem from this book, which came out a couple of years ago. And it's called Sway, and it's sort of versions of poems from the troubadour tradition that I became kind of obsessed by, poems by people like Arnaud Daniel and Bertrand de Born and Bernard de Ventadorn and Beatrice de Dia and so on. And by the time I kind of done the book, I couldn't get their voices out of my head, and I ended up writing this poem, which was published at the end of the book. And It was really almost as if one of these poets had kind of gone to sleep and woken up several centuries later in the mountains of Cork and Kerry. And so this is the last section of a poem called Road Songs. Tuchar in Irish is a kind of a path, narrow path. This is it. The cart track, butter path, the rumoured Tuchar unmissable, narrowest of narrow causeways, along which, again, the vagrant heart sets out. Stone heart, dirt-flecked, sand-rained, buried, snagged, feasting and famished, loping from one end to another. I stand on a stile, inhaling field, inhaling sea. Close the gate where goats bleat and old cars rust in the grass. Boreen to mountain, dune grass to sea, my geography of desire. The poem steps before me, crossing a stream, climbing the stony path. Bramble heart, harried and stumbled, lifted and slowed, paused in the gap, nailed to itself, on its way to you. Thanks very much.
I'd like to congratulate Gallery Press on the occasion of its 50th birthday, and I'm going to read from the collection The Parchment Boat, which was published by Gallery Press in 1997. I had just spent some time in Kerry as writer-in-residence, and one night I was coming back from the village of Clohan. It was a November night, that first night of frost, when, as an old neighbour of mine used to say, the stars were jumping, and it was just so striking. I just had to get out and look at them. There's a place name mentioned here, Glaun na Ngalth, which means Madman's Glen, and I was told by an archaeologist that apparently people in Kerry, if their relatives weren't behaving if they're behaving strangely, this is many centuries ago, they used to bring them there, and people used to drink the water and live in the trees, and when they were collected a few months later, they were much more sensible. And I'm told that somebody did a study on the water recently and found a very high incident of lithium. Glaun na Ngalth is allegedly the Glan Vulcan, which is mentioned in Seamus Heaney's Sweeney Astray, the Madman's Glen. Night. Coming back from Clohan in the sudden frost of a November night, I was ambushed by the river of stars. Disarmed by lit skies, I had utterly forgotten this arc of darkness, this black night where the frost-hammered stars were notes thrown from a chanter, crans of light. So I wasn't ready for the dreadful glamour of Orion as he struck out over Bardree Gown in his belt of stars. At Glaun na Ngalth, his bow of stars was drawn against my heart. What could I do? Rather than drive into a pitch-black ditch, I got out twice, leaned back against the car, and stared up at our windy, untidy loft, where old people had flung up old junk they'd thought might come in handy. Ploughs, ladles, bears, lions, a clatter of heroes, few heroines, a path for the white cow, a swan, and low down, almost within reach, Venus, completely unfazed by the frost. Murdering the Language. This was written at the time of an announcement of ceasefire in the north of Ireland, and really it's an argument for pluralities, and saying, there are no pure races, there are no pure languages. When I was a child, I loved grammar. We used to be told in school not to murder the language. The language which we spoke in at the playground was very different to the language which we parsed. So this, as I say, is just an argument to recognise that all of us come from a great, great mixture of peoples and cultures, and to embrace that. Murdering the Language. Why did I love the neat examination of a noun under the pointer, the analysis of a sentence lifted out of talk, canal water halted in a loch? Mood, tense, gender, what performs the action? What suffers the action? What governs what? What qualifies, modifies? When we whispered in our desks, we spoke our book of invasions, an unruly wash of Victorian pedantry, Cromwellian English, Scots, the jetsam and the beached bones of Irish, a grammarian's nightmare. But we parsed a small rectangular sea and never missed the flow or wondered why victories won in blood are fastened in grammar and in grammar's dream of order, or why the dream of order draws us as surely as the dream of freedom, or why correct language is spoken only in the capital. Our language was tidal. It lipped the shale cliffs, a long and tedious campaign, and ran up the beaches over sand, seaweed, stones. Laws learned by heart in school are the hardest to unlearn, but too much has been suffered since in the name of who governs whom. It is time to step outside the cold schools, to find a new, less brutal grammar, which can allow what we know, that this northern shore was wrought not in one day by one bright wave, but by souling the rush and tug of many tides. I'm going to read a poem by the late Frances Harvey, whose poetry inspired me greatly, and I'd like to think I learnt a lot from him. It's called The Death of Thady. He could not tell you why he loves the place so much, and loves a word that he would never use. He could not tell you why there is no other place where he walks taller than Errigal and plants his feet like dolmens in a wind-scoured land of scant grass and scanter sky. He could not tell you why, when he lay ailing in the warm, bright ward, the dark glens and the lonely lakes in the sky and the flagged cabin, cold and bare as a prison cell, were heaven to him as sure as this was hell. He could not tell you why, after the priest had gone and the nurse indifferently watched him die, he suddenly saw the hill wind swirling the turf mould on the wardroom floor, and counted the last of his sheep filing like mourners through the gap of the door.
The first poem I'd like to read is one by another gallery author, Michael Hartnett. I first read this poem, Water Baby, in the Irish Times way back in the 1980s, and it was published in his collection Poems for Younger Women. Water Baby. Already the chestnuts, each a small green mace, fall in the rusted chainmail leaves. The swifts, like black harpoons, fail against the whaleskin sky. Wasps in this skyless summer have no place. Small quarrels swell to great and flooded rifts. Lime trees, prematurely old, decide to die. The heavy steel wool curtain never lifts. Many cling to rafts of music, but I am not happy with the human race, aching for its sun god. He kills as well. I skip dripping in the shining rain and feel the minute fingers tap my face. And breathing in St. Bartholomew's bell, I look up to the sky and kiss the rain. And I'd like to read two poems of my own. The first is entitled Walk Song. My bag was light, so I put stones in it to right my crooked bones. The harness load buckled me down, nose to the road that led from town, as though each building, wall and tree were now tilting back against me. But I was damned if I'd stop now. So here I am, grey hair, wet brow, through meadows singing, and yet to crack, a city swinging off my back. And the second poem I'd like to read is entitled Island Sonnet. It's about a month I spent on an island in Sweden, in the middle of a lake. My island month is over, and I go back. I wrote, was lonely. I saw the other islands locked in the lake on days of sunny silence. At night, I read a long, meandering book. Deer and boar would make the odd foray across the frozen fields. I settled in and found a way to stretch out on my own. The month is over. Soon I'll get the ferry. And I go back to you, my only love, in the midst of it, the whole while I was gone. The hassle I can't hack now and again, and need to see reduced to just a fleck, a flake, that falls somewhere over the lake. But now you draw me. You are why I leave.